Welcome, everybody. It's great to be spending our last Friday of May together, heading into the summer break, hopefully a break for most of us. We are thrilled to have with us Dr. Paige Evans, who is going to be sharing how to write and hopefully get a Noyce NSF grant. So for those of you who haven't met Dr. Paige Evans, she is the co-director, clinical professor, and master teacher for the Teach Houston program at the University of Houston, where she teaches and oversees courses in pre-service STEM teacher education. Prior to joining the University of Houston faculty in 2008, she spent 18 years as a math and science educator and served in various leadership positions. Dr. Evans secured $14 million in grant funding and is the PI and co-PI on several federal grants with the goal to broaden STEM participation and improve STEM literacy for all. She frequently publishes and presents on her research interests that include STEM teacher preparation, STEM education, and culturally responsive pedagogy. Moreover, she recently co-authored the book, Preparing Teachers to Teach the STEM Disciplines in America's Urban Schools. Dr. Evans served as the president of the UT STEM Educators Association and was an American Physical Society Physics Teacher Education Coalition Fellow. It's a mouthful. She is the recipient of 4 University of Houston Teaching Excellence Awards, including the 2022 University of Houston Distinguished Leadership in Teaching Excellence Award. Additionally, she was honored with the American Educational Research Association Narrative Inquiry Outstanding Publication Award, the American Physical Society for Improving Undergraduate Physics Education Award, and the University of Houston's 50 in 5 Faculty Award, and STEM for All Video Showcase Awards in both 2021 and 2022. So, without further ado, the very qualified Dr. Paige Evans will be sharing with us her knowledge and expertise on grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for coming to this session the day before our 3-day weekend and much needed day off. I know that I need it, and I can see from your smiles that you do too. And it's good to see everyone that I just saw at the co-director meeting a couple hours ago. So good to see you again. Do I need to re-put that link in the chat? Is there a link in the chat, or do I need to re-put it in there?
I'll enter it, and as people enter, I'll keep adding it.
Okay, so what that is, it's a bunch of resources that may or may not be helpful. Hopefully will be helpful, and I'll go through some of those. One is an outline that I've used that's been successful in the past, sample letters that you have to have, so you can see the specificity that worked for, at least for our successful grants, and then some other documents that are mandatory, like facilities and equipment, things that are on your campus that somebody already has that you do not have to reinvent. But anyway, I'm going to share my screen, and if there's any questions as we go along, we can either do questions at the end, or if you just have that burning question, you can put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask, because this is not a too large of an audience, so I think we can be pretty informal. And so I am going to share my screen, and yes, I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, so I changed the title. So Elizabeth said how to write and get an NSF grant. So I changed it to how to write and hopefully get an NSF Noyce grant. And also I put the caveat in there that this does not necessarily reflect the views of NSF. I'm in no way representing them. I'm just showing what has worked for me in the past. I am a self-taught grant writer, and so I've learned a lot of things of not to do, and hopefully can provide some shortcuts to you as you're writing the grant. So in the chat or unmute, are you applying for an NSF Noyce Track 1 grant? Now, if you're applying for other grants, I think this will still be helpful if it's NSF. But if you are applying, what are your main goals? What is your why? And if you can put that in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so we have one person going to expand to track 2. Track 4, that's great, induction course. Get funded to support science and math in rural Nevada. Scholarships, yes. Our students always need scholarships. Okay, more support to students to finish, yes, because they can get scholarships their last 2 years. Help with recruitment. Okay, very good, scholarships. Okay, so yes, so the scholarships, they are great. Track 1 is a great place for scholarships. It can induce induction, it can support community. And so I am going to continue on so that I'm not trying to be braggy about me. But I wanted you to know that I wrote my first NSF grant prior to my doctoral degree. Okay, so I don't want that to be a perceived barrier for anybody. And so even though it said 14 million, I've really received approximately 16 million. And as a PI, I've written 20 grants and gotten 19 of those. Several are big ones, they're federal. And then as a co-PI or senior personnel, I've been on 8 grants, 5 federal. Okay, so just a little bit of motivation. You will not get a grant if you don't try. Okay, so I wrote my first grant way back in 2010 or 2011. I was just a baby grant writer and didn't know what I was doing. Was told by my co-director, don't bother with an NSF grant, you'll never get one. And he was not a bad co-director, he was good, but I'm saying that to say that it's a good thing I had already written one, because if I hadn't, I may have listened to him. Because what did I know? I had only been at the university since 2008. I was a new faculty member and just trying to figure out my way around U of H. So luckily I said to him, well, I've already written one, so let's see what happens. And so we did not get that first one, but we got all this great feedback. And so then I reapplied for it and I got it the second time around. And that started my whole introduction into NSF Noyce. I had 2 small grants before that. They were $80,000 grants to have a camp for a residential camp, which is very stressful, by the way, for underserved middle school students, which that's also stressful. But this was my first big NSF grant. And ever since then, I have applied for many others and luckily have been successful. So where do you start? Okay. Now, there is a link to a bunch of documents, including this, but in there you will see the new NSF Noyce solicitation. So in a way, it's kind of good that this was canceled last month. Well, it wasn't good that we had the family emergency. That part wasn't good. But from the time from when I was supposed to give this before to now, they have the current NSF Noyce solicitation. Okay. The documents in there, it's a PDF. The due date is August 29th. So there is plenty of time to write this summer and get it done. I always like to start 3 months early. Okay. So we are writing a Noyce Track 3 grant. And we have already met as a team to figure out our goals and objectives and to select our grant members, but we haven't really written anything yet. We've just done some preliminary planning. We haven't done the budget, and I'll talk about that too. So what I'm going to talk about today is the Noyce Track 1, Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarships and Stipends, Track 1. Okay, now, to get some ideas, a good thing to do, okay, so you're sitting here thinking, okay, yes, I definitely want scholarships for my students. It typically has to have something else, okay? And so what you can do to get some ideas is you can go and see what has been previously funded. And so I'm going to click on that link. The higher the number, the more recent the award. So for example, if the award is 19 with a bunch of numbers. You wrote it in 2019 and it got awarded probably in 2020. Okay. So something that starts with 21, that probably means you wrote it in 21 and you got funded in 22. Okay, so I'm going to click on this. And so this is where I can get some ideas. I can go down to browse projects funded by this program. So this right here, this is the whole, this has the Noyce solicitation. It talks about what it's about. It has
Paige, I'm sorry, we're still seeing your PowerPoint. So if you could share screen to the website.
okay, new share. So I clicked on a link. And so when I go back to the PowerPoint, I need to remember to share to that because I must be sharing the PowerPoint in that screen. But anyway, I clicked on a link in the PowerPoint. It goes to the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. If you're writing one, you might be familiar with this or not, but I would go to browse projects funded by this program. And I'll just peruse this and find something that looks like it might be something I would like to do. Here's one, Northern Illinois Noyce Science Teaching Scholarship and Internship Program. Okay, so you can click on this and it takes you to the abstract. So if you scroll down here, this is where you can find their abstract and the goals to their project. And you can get a lot of ideas from this. And that's how I got ideas for my first grant. I was like, oh, it looks like a lot of these grants have summer internships. And so on my first grant, I did the Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. And for juniors and seniors, for freshmen and sophomores, I did an internship program, a paid summer internship program where they could work as camp counselors and teaching assistants in a camp. And that's where I got these ideas. Recently in our recent grant, we had something called we call it a teacher interest group, but I got an idea from one of these grants that were funded. And I saw, oh, they have this group that meets once a month to build community and networking and all of that. There's some grants that you'll find that have enhanced induction. So peruse through those, get your ideas. You can see the project has 3 main goals and they actually list the goals. You can get a plethora of ideas from here. I'm going to now share back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so that's that. Now, assembling your team. Any advisement on building a strong team? Absolutely. Because I've been on grants where there's small teams, and then there was this one grant that started in 2016. Luckily, it was successful. I wrote the grant. 2 of the co-PIs, no, 3, my whole team left. One went to teach in Wales, one went to Texas A&M University, and one just left the university. And so, but that was just bad luck. And then I've also been on teams where not everyone is strong and they don't end up doing their part. And if they don't end up doing their part, guess who gets to do it? The PI, because it all comes back on you. So you want to have some kind of a trust built in there. Sometimes you pick somebody because they look good on a grant and you know they probably won't be involved that much. You can have that, but just plan for that. Okay, so I say start small and then add personnel depending on your budget. So what we're doing currently, as I said, we're writing a Noyce Track 3 grant. Okay, so we've started with a small team of people that are really interested in the topic around our grant. And we met and brainstormed and to see what else we want to add into that grant. And based on that, we've invited others to partner with us. So for Noyce, okay, you have to include 1 faculty member from a STEM department that has a terminal STEM degree. Okay. You have to include one faculty member from an education department that has a terminal education degree. So I am housed in a STEM department, but have a terminal education degree. So I don't count for anything, but I can still be a PI. Okay, but I don't get to check off one of those boxes. So that means everyone in our program, we don't get to check that box. So we have our core team, and we've invited somebody from a STEM department, and we've invited somebody from an education department, and we're meeting with them in a couple of weeks to more formalize our goals. Okay, so that's why I said include others that support the goals of the grant. You're going to want to include somebody with grant experience. Okay. Because they're going to look at that. When they review the grant, they're going to say, hey, does someone on here have grant experience? Do we think they're capable of doing everything with this grant, fulfilling the obligations of this grant? Okay, so that's really important. And so then, you're thinking, well, how can I get grant experience if I've never gotten a grant? That's why you're going to want somebody on your team with grant experience so they can check off that box. Okay. You're going to have to include a high need local education agency. For those in the state of Texas, we call them ISDs, independent school districts. So you're going to have to include a school district and a public school. Okay, that was new as of 2021. They've kept that. You're going to want to read that criteria in the grant solicitation, because they come up with ways, okay, what's the definition of a high need school? And it's usually one with high teacher turnover or teachers teaching out of field. That definition is there. And for us in the state of Texas, we can go on the TEA taper reports and actually say, hey, this school has a 20% turnover, or this district does, or most of their teachers are in years 1 to 3 of teaching. So you can find all that information out somewhere. Okay, so then after that, you have your small team. Okay, what do you hope to accomplish? If you're doing a Noyce Track 1, you're going to have scholarships for STEM majors. Or in our last grant, we did a Noyce Track 1 grant for career changers. So I currently have 2 Noyce Track 1 grants and a Noyce Track 3. So one that I currently have is for STEM majors, undergraduates that would like to become a teacher. And then the other one that I have is for STEM professionals. Okay, so they are career changers or people that just graduated. Okay, so you can do either one. You typically need to include something else. And that's where I brought up, see what other people have done. And you don't know, there might be some idea there you haven't even thought of. A typical one is summer internships. They could be research internships, or they could be camp internships. They could even be activities at STEM museums, science centers, STEM labs. An activity could be induction support. You have to have induction support in there. But you could make that even bigger. They usually like to see, you'll see in the grant solicitation language, things about culturally responsive pedagogy. If you have a program that has not infused that into your program, that could be one of your goals. Okay. Like I said, get ideas from previous awards. And can you include reimbursements for step 1 or step 2 or mentor teacher compensation? That I would talk to a program officer about. I would think it would be yes for step 1 or step 2, try it out. But you'd want to talk to a program officer about that specifically. And then as far as mentor teacher compensation, I have not included that on a track 1 before, but I have included it on a track 3. But those, I would jot down all those questions and ask the program officer, which is next. Meet with a program officer, okay? And I tell this to people, and they're like, oh no, you know, I don't want to meet with a program officer. Some people don't want to meet with one because program officers are busy. But if you meet with a program officer, they can say, yeah, that sounded pretty good, or you might want to think about this. So you do get some clues and hints. And then Jane, I think it's Jane, just asked, which track is the career changer grant I mentioned? That was also a track one. So I have 2 track ones simultaneously, one for undergraduate STEM majors and one for career changers, which could be somebody that just graduated. Now, meet with the program officer after you have a firm idea of your goals, and then I would send a 1-pager. Don't send more than a 1-pager. In fact, Karen and I were just in a meeting for another grant with a program officer, and she was like, you sent 4 pages. I couldn't read it all. So we didn't send it, someone else did. So send maybe a list of your goals, more like a 1-page summary, not to exceed a 1-page summary. But if you had your grant goals there, the program officer would know what you're talking about. Then you're going to want to attend the Noyce Grant webinars, okay? There is a link to the Noyce Grant webinars, and my PowerPoint is in there, so you can have access to the links. I'm attending the Noyce Track 3. Actually, I'm just going to click on it and reshare. Okay, so the dates. So they had one on May 25th. Okay. Oh, that was the one for Noyce Track 1. Okay, so that one's over. So you are going to have to, you can watch the webinar because they will have those slides. But I would definitely meet with a Noyce program officer. Are you able to see my PowerPoint again? Yes. Okay, thumbs up. So you can get a recording of those. Okay, so now you have your small team, or maybe you have your big team because you know that the grant will support it. Well, okay, the budget can be kind of tricky. So for a track 1, you can get 1.2 million with a duration of up to 5 years. If you include an incentive, which might be a community college collaboration, you can get an additional 250,000. So I did that on one of my grants back in the day. I did get the extra 250,000. I want to say I learned a lot from that, but that collaboration wasn't so successful. But I know people have successful collaborations with community colleges all the time. It's just that the one that I did, I didn't think through so well. I would do it differently if I was going to do it again. So your scholarships must be at least 10,000 per year and starting their junior year. Okay. So, and they're going to want a justification for that. So you're going to look up your cost of attendance and come up with a number that makes sense to you. And so on the last grant that we did, we're doing 12,000 per year. But on the last one for career changers, we also did about 12,000, but we should have done more in hindsight. We should have had a larger amount, lessons learned for us. So the scholars cannot exceed a maximum of 3 years from the start of their junior year. There's language in the grant solicitation. And so this is where the budget gets tricky. At least 60% of the proposed total direct costs must be allocated for scholarships, which is track 1, or stipends or fellowships. Okay, so that's where you're going to work with your grant budget office, which I have not done yet for the track 3. So with the track 2 and the track 3, they have a duration of, they have 3 million. And that could be up to 5 or 6 years, depending on whether you do 1 or 2 cohorts. And then the track 4, I can't remember what that is. I think it's 1 million, but you can add money based on how many institutions are involved, but don't quote me on that. It's all in there. When you do read the grant solicitation, and you're like, okay, I'm doing track 1. When it has specific stuff to track 2, track 3, and track 4, you can ignore that, which is probably obvious to some. It wasn't to me. Way back in the day when I started out writing grants, I was reading the whole thing. And then in hindsight, I was like, oh, I really only needed to read this one section. So if you are set on a track, it's easiest just to read that section of the grant. Okay, now, after you work on the budget and your goals, then you can go back to assembling the rest of your PI team, and start writing. Now, this is just my approach, okay? Other people have their own approach, but my approach is I don't want to write about it if I can't afford it. And so that's why I'm always like budget, budget, budget. Because otherwise you have all these great ideas, you write it, and then you're like, at the end, if you do your budget later, you're like, oh, I can't really afford that. Then you kind of wasted your time. Okay, so try and front load the budget so you can see who you can afford, because you really are restricted by that 60%. Now for writing, you'll want to follow the Noyce solicitation. You're going to want to follow the PAPPG, which is a very intimidating document that they have that I put in the folder. I wouldn't read through the whole PAPPG because your grant people should be familiar with that. But if there's some sections that you have questions about, they do have that very, very long table of contents where you can go exactly to what you're thinking of. Okay. So basically, you're going to have a project summary, which is a 1-pager for any of these, for any tracks, for any NSF. You have a 1-pager where you include your type track and include all partnering institutions. Okay, so now this is what I shared with you, okay? Like a bunch of stuff. Okay, but if I go to here, I can see, and it might be pretty small for you, but hopefully you can pull up your own. That's the PAPPG, that's a monster. I wouldn't necessarily look at it right now, but it would have your current and pending, like the other documents you need. It says the screen sharing has stopped. Am I still screen sharing? Yes, okay. I got a note that said it stopped. Okay, here is the NSF Noyce solicitation. Okay, so I want to pull this up, and I highlighted some important parts for you. So if you scroll down to page 13, I'm just going to scroll down to where it's highlighted. Okay, this stuff right here, this is what it's, your project summary, project description. This is all what it is.
Paige, we're still seeing your folder, your Google folder.
Why is it letting me share a screen? I must have something. Okay. Okay. So this is on page 13, and I highlighted it for you because this is for most NSF grants. This is like the rubric. Okay. So this is all the stuff that has to go in there. Okay. And that's basically how I make my outline. Okay. Now, I am going to pull up one other thing called a sample project description outline. And then I will share that with you as well. That's in there. It's called sample project description outline. Let me share. I don't know why maybe I just lost all my virtual skills. and can't share my screen appropriately. I don't know. So this is my last outline, and I included it here just in case it's helpful. Okay. It may not be helpful to you because your brain may work differently, but I took this off of the Noyce solicitation. And then I have another document in there called the one-page summary, and they're all samples, and those are just things that have to be in there. The other thing I do, so this is 15 pages, which is not a lot. We always run out of room. And so just do your best. But these are the things that had to be in there as of the last Noyce solicitation. Okay. So your project description, 15 pages, include all those sections on there. Okay. Now this, and you have to have an external evaluator. Remember that when you do your budget. And so you're going to want to allocate like 8 to 10% for that. Okay. It might be lower. I usually just in my brain, I think 10%, but my last one really ended up being about 8% for my external evaluator. If it's at your university, it's simpler, and it can be at your university as long as they are not affiliated with your project. On mine, I've been using an external evaluator from Texas A&M. And so then I have to do a sub-award, okay, which my grant office helps me with. So that's your project description. Like I said, I have a sample outline that's worked for me that we're probably going to start with that and tweak it. And all those things that are in the Noyce solicitation, the other thing I do to make it easier for the NSF reviewers is I bold certain things that are in the solicitation. Because that way the reviewer can go check, check, check. So first you want everything to be there. And then of course the ideas and the goals have to be sound, but everything also has to be there. So I always include, I bold the language that's exactly in the Noyce solicitation. Why not make it easy for the reviewer? Okay, so then there are supplementary documents, and that's where I thought maybe this would be helpful to provide this for you. That's why I have the little folder with some sample supplementary documents. You need letters of collaboration. And these letters are not the boilerplate NSF language that says, I commit to doing this if it's funded. They want more detail on these. So you can see what I put in mine. Mine usually, I write them for all the districts and I make them sound a little bit different. So if you have a graduate assistant or a student that's good at writing, that could be a task for them. So I had a very gifted writer that was an undergraduate, and I said, okay, I need 10 district letters because we partner with a lot of districts. You don't need 10 letters. You only need one district and one school. But since I had so many districts, I wanted them all to say the same thing, but sound a little bit different. So little creative writing. You'll get better results if you provide them with a draft of the letter because they're too busy to write a letter. They can change the letter, tweak the letter, do whatever they want, but they always appreciate if you help them with the letter. I also have samples in there from the deans. You'll need Dean of College of Education, Dean of whatever your College of Science is called. And then you'll need school district superintendent or equivalent, and you'll need a principal. So start on those. The other things that I put in there, I put the latest template for the bio sketch, the current and pending support, the collaborators and affiliators. Each co-PI and PI have to fill out those 3 things. They're not difficult, but they always change the template. So that's kind of annoying because you have one that works and then you have to add stuff to it. And I have in there a sample data management plan. They will look at that. So that's part of the review criteria. Do they like your data management plan? You probably have someone on your campus that has one. I included a sample of what I did for my last grant. that was acceptable. I haven't read to see if there's new language out about it. So just bear in mind, any of this stuff is from a grant that was awarded in 2022. You'll need something called facilities and equipment. So once again, I included a sample there in case it's helpful. And you probably have one that already exists on your campus for your college. So then I have another document in there, and these are all the tests. Okay. So we haven't done this yet with our Noyce Track 3. We haven't said, oh, because we're not far enough along. We haven't said, okay, who's doing what, who's going to do this, and what's the deadline? Because we all have different strengths. Let's say you're a brand new grant writer, right? And you're learning, okay? You would probably, if you were doing, you'll want to be part of the project description and maybe have a section in that. But there are things that everybody can do, okay? Everyone has to do the current pending, the biosketch, COA, and all that. And everyone will want to chime in on the summary, but really the PI usually does the heavy lifting on the writing. It's not to say, I mean, everyone helps out and does their section, but PI usually does a lot of it. Other people can help with letters of support. If you have a good person that's really good at budget, you know, if anyone needs sample of a budget justification, I can provide that. But anyway, this is kind of an outline of what we do. And you might have more things on yours. So then after that, have someone else proofread it to make sure that you include all the sections. Because like I said, there is a rubric and it is based on the solicitation in that one section. And then keep polishing. And I have talked a lot, so I am going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Can you share once again? You said something about CSP, and I didn't write that down.
Okay, so that's current and pending support. And so there's a document in there, the latest document that NSF uses. And in that, you are going to put, if you have no support, then it's really easy to fill out. Then you only have to put whatever proposal you're doing now. But if you have current, let's say I have those few grants I mentioned, I'll have those on my current pending support. And basically you'll see in there, it'll have the objectives of the grant, the duration of the grant, how much support I'm getting, because NSF does not like you to have more than 2 months of NSF support in a summer, but you can get more than that. You just have to write up a justification for that. And then you'll include your current proposal and any other proposals that you're writing.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Paige, do you have any tips for getting in front of the school district people to get your letters back? We have a terrible time, especially in the summer, getting things returned. Do you have any special advice for that?
So all that is built on partnership. So I would go to your master teacher that has the closest relationship with human resources, where they get their mentor teachers. That's who I reach out to. So I'm like this with HR because I have to get all these placements, right? And so that's who I start with. And I'll say, hey, Spring Branch, for example, Karen, can you get this signed by one of your superintendents? And she'll do that. And the same thing with all the other districts. That's how I do it. Whoever has a relationship, whether or not they're writing the grant with you, obviously your program's going to benefit from the grant. So have them reach out.
Paige, one more question. You mentioned that you got money for camps and scholarship. Did you put all that in the same grant, or that's two separate grants?
I put that in the same grant. So when I envision a Noyce grant, a Noyce Track 1 grant, in my brain, I envision, okay, I have to have scholarships. That's the main thing, right? But I need one other thing. And so early on, my one other thing was camps, because they're really good because they get to teach for 2 weeks in the summer and get paid, right? And so that's what I did early on. I've also done summer research with STEM professors. That was more difficult because it was hard to get the availability. And then camps got a little bit, camps are amazing. If I did another one, I would go back to camps. As long as I didn't have to put on, I love putting on camps, but I'm just too busy right now. So you'd have to have somebody that was willing to put on the camp unless you wanted to do it yourself. And my last grant, I had what we call a teacher interest group. And that meets once a week to build community. So I didn't put any internships in there. Because on that one, I'm like, okay, I've gotten a bunch of these. I want more money for faculty salaries because you're really limited since you're spending 60% on scholarship and stipends. Then if you spend a few more dollars on summer internships, then that really limits what you can give to your faculty, because your faculty need to be supported also in the summer so that they have time to do this.
Thank you, yes.
But I don't think you have to have I think summer camps are amazing, but I realized, okay, budget wise, it just wasn't in the cards for the last one because we needed more faculty support. Other questions?
I have 2 questions, but if they're too much or too specific, I'll ask another time if you want to direct me to do that. Did you ever do a capacity building?
I have not.
Okay. And then my second question was, I was asking about the career changer, because those could go track 1 or track 2, if I'm reading it right. Was there a reason you decided to do 1 instead of 2?
Yeah, I thought 1 was simpler because track 2, do you have to get a master's or no?
Yeah, you have to complete a degree.
Yeah, and so that was difficult. So I've done a track 3 where they got a STEM education master's, but they already had certification. I believe track 2 does the certification.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from working with the track 3, that was really difficult to work to get that in place. It took me 2 years to get that STEM education master's in place. And then I applied for the grant and it ended up being great. Don't get me wrong, but I don't have 2 years. So the other thing, so for the career changers, it's certification only. Okay, so I took our version of teach, and a lot of you have been on that call too, and our team made an ACP strand where they do it in 9 months. So it's longer than your regular ACPs, but it maintains fidelity with the teach vision. And so that's how I did it that way. And in hindsight, those scholarships need to be more. Okay, but they're not, and it's too late. So that might be one of those where I go back to the program officer and say, hey, I might have to lower my numbers and give larger scholarships. And so I feel, since I have a long track record of success, that conversation will be okay. But if you're thinking of doing that grant, pay special attention to how much money they need. Okay, because when I wrote it, it's kind of, grants, you don't know what you don't know, right? And then you write it and you're like, oops, should have thought through that a little more carefully. But all in all, I think it's going to work out well.
Paige, what would you raise that to? What was it, and what would you think would be a better price for it now?
So it was some weird amounts, like 11,500. And all that was dictated by the 60%, right? I would have raised it to 20,000. But only because on that call we were in earlier, they get an additional 20,000 from the districts. So in 9 months, they can get 40,000. And that's what they're getting with our current DOE grant, not anymore, but with this, they would get 20 plus I'm just going to call it 12 because it's 11 something. So 32. And so without the districts putting in 20,000, I think I'd bump it up even a little more. Yeah. Maybe even to 30, but I've seen some grants where they're giving out really large sums of money. And so it has to be based on your cost of attendance. It can't exceed your cost of attendance. But that includes like living and stuff. So as long as you can justify it, I would go up higher for career changers, lower for undergrads. And you can even do a combination. I've seen those too. I've seen where people do some here and some there, but to me, that would be kind of confusing to write. So it was just simpler to write 2 separate grants. Anything else?
Paige, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask how do you write it in to roll it out? So like considering the funding would start in year 1, but the scholarships don't necessarily start until their junior year. How do you write in to maybe fund a few of those scholarships that first year, or how have you done it, or how have you seen it done in the past?
Okay, so the way I usually do it, okay, first of all, I put an early start date. Okay. So they're always like, ooh, April, that's too early. It's due in August. I put an early start date because I feel like it gets reviewed faster. Okay, because if I put a start date of the following September, not so urgent, is it? And so I do the planning, but those that are already in the program, yes, I've done it both ways. One time I did, okay, the grant starts in April. We're going to do recruiting in the summer and in the fall, and their first scholarship is in the spring. So I've done it that way. That worked out pretty good. And I've done it another way where, hey, we recruit and we start awarding in the fall. Now, given the timeline of when we have to do scholarships for us, that would be difficult. And so I would go with some planning time to recruit. And so it's important in your grant that you put what you're doing during that time period. Okay, that, hey, I'm recruiting people into my program. Now, if you're envisioning that they start with a freshman year, right? And they're going to do a summer internship for a few years, that would be how you would do it. And then they would go into the grant program junior, senior year. You can write this grant for 5 years. So you can do that if you want. I didn't do that because our students were already in the program. Some were leaving because they couldn't afford it. And so I felt like, on one hand, this is a good recruitment mechanism when we go to orientation, say, hey, we have all these scholarships. But on the other hand, it's also a good retention mechanism because they're in the program. They don't have money to student teach, and this could help out, junior, senior year. So both ways. And so it really just depends on how you're going to do it. A lot of times for the summer internships, they see those as ways to recruit students into your program. So you'll see that in the grant solicitation. But what I found out is that didn't necessarily recruit them. This is at U of H. Other people, they may have had more success. It didn't recruit them into the scholarship program, but they did stay with the Teach Houston program. They got scared about that teaching commitment, because that teaching commitment for each year of scholarship is 2 years to teach in a high need school district. So they see high need school district, and then in their brain, they see these places with guns, and they get visions of scary stuff. And so when we recruit students for this, we make sure that we clearly define what a high need school district is. And that's any school with one high need school. That one high need school can be an elementary school. Okay. And so that makes it less scary with the teaching commitment. They do get scared with the teaching commitment because they're like, oh no, do I really want to teach? So
We found that in the past too, Paige. What qualifications did you put? Like, what's the application process and qualification for you to decide who gets your grants?
So we have a scholarship team. And we have lots of scholarships. We have foundation scholarships, these Noyce scholarships, and a Department of Education scholarship. We have one application. Okay, everything on the application has everything that I need to report. Well, maybe not everything. I see Karen on the call. She's like, we need this in the application. But when we set it up, we put in everything that was needed for when they get the scholarship and report out. Now, with that, the whole scholarship application, it says, are you interested in an NSF Noyce scholarship? And it gives a little bit more information about that. And so then what we do is we meet as a team and we score them and award them accordingly. Now, in our last one for undergraduates, there was additional criteria around social justice and education. And so if they were going for a Noyce scholarship, we had 2 additional questions that was specific to our Noyce grant application. Did I answer that? I started talking. I'm like, I don't know if I answered that. I think I did.
Did you have a GPA requirement?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you for asking that. You have to have a GPA requirement. Okay. Under all that, I can say from writing the Noyce grant, the one thing that we all have in our advantage is we have a STEM teacher preparation program. Okay. Clearly outline the whole STEM teacher preparation program. That's like a page in itself. Now, then your recruitment and your selection criteria, that is also a big thing in the Noyce solicitation. In my first Noyce, I did 3.0. And then the first 2 Noyces I've gotten 4 track 1s. So the first 2 I did a 3.0, and then the third one, which is our undergraduate one right now, I did a 2.75. Because I had students that were right around a 2.9 and not at the 3.0 threshold. And so to me, I would go down as low as you would feel comfortable, because they might have a 2.75 because they're working 20 extra hours a week. And we all know that they get in this thing where, well, I can't get a high GPA because all I do is work and go to school. And so the scholarship can help them. And I mean, the Noyce program is pretty amazing in that they can get these scholarships. You can build a supportive network around them. You can build a community, but not only that, their time to degree completion is faster. You know, when we made the comparison amongst the 2 groups. And so it's really a great thing. If you can get one of these, I personally think that every U teach should have one of these. It's much easier for us because we already have a program, and that's why that's a big thing in the solicitation. You have to describe your program, and we can all do that. If anyone wants to see how I described our program, just email me. I can send you that part of the grant because it's probably similar to yours. Now, even though sometimes I think I do a great job of describing the program and the clarification questions, sometimes they come back and they want more description, because that's a big thing. Do you have the infrastructure in place to where you will be successful? Because there's a lot of Noyce grants out there that have only awarded a couple people. And that's not the intent. They couldn't get people because they didn't have a program in place. So we have a few minutes left. I want to say, if you have any questions, contact me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. And Elizabeth did, there's the link to all those documents in case they're helpful. And I encourage you to do this. You can get one of these. Start early, because it's not one of those last minute things, especially when your grants office has to push it through and do the budget, and there's lots of clicks involved. So start early, and reach out if you have any questions. I really think all the You Teach programs could definitely get one of these and benefit, and your students will be very happy.